I'd like to take a moment to thank the Blockchain Academy. The Blockchain Academy is an educational training firm offering blockchain training to the enterprise. The Blockchain Academy offers courses for both management and developers, offering delivery online and in live classrooms. The Blockchain Academy works with enterprise clients to create and deliver innovative training programs globally. They recently announced a new blockchain course targeted towards attorneys. To learn more about the Blockchain Academy, visit them at www.theblockchainacademy.com.
This is the Blockchain 360 podcast. Blockchain 360 is a podcast of interviews and discussions about the current state and direction of blockchain. Thank you for joining us today. If this is your first time listening, then thank you for coming. The Blockchain 360 podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes are found at our website, blockchain360.co. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at Blockchain360. All links discussed today are included in the show notes.
Hi, my name is Bryant Nielsen, and I'm your host here on Blockchain 360, where we ask you to, of course, follow us, download us, and review us on iTunes, on Google Play, on iHeartRadio, on Stitcher, and anywhere else you can find us. But today's guest is Nicholas Fierro, who is the CEO of Mimir Blockchain Solutions based in Atlanta, Georgia. And people are motivated to action when he speaks because his unique background, his passion for making a difference in the world, and what he's been able to accomplish as a tech entrepreneur. As a former nuclear reactor operator for the U.S. Navy, he has recognized that he thrives under pressure and embraces challenges, including how to use technology to drive common and social good. In February 2014, he worked in Switzerland to perform the DevOps for the Ethereum Foundation pre-token cell. It was there he found himself fascinated by blockchain technology and how it could transform industries that impact our daily lives. This passion for bringing blockchain into the mainstream led him to launch Mimir, an exciting startup focused on offering a scalable solution needed to connect to the Ethereum blockchain, secure augmented reality and digital airspace, and transparent asset tracking for nonprofit efforts. I want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us here on Blockchain 360.
Thank you for having me on.
So before I get too far into this, you have this background in the U.S. Navy. How is it that you ended up in the Navy, and how is it that you transitioned from the Navy over to blockchain?
Well, I was excited when I was young. I wanted to join the Navy all the way from when I was in high school. And I was really passionate about being able to go out and see the world and travel. And the free college that kind of came with it certainly didn't hurt my decision for what I wanted to do. And so I went in and tried to do the most challenging program that there was. And that led me into the Navy.
So what does I'm trying to figure this out. What does a nuclear reactor operator do?
Well, have you ever seen The Simpsons?
Of course.
Well, Homer Simpson is sitting at his job behind this, series of buttons and screens, and he is actually a reactor operator, funnily enough.
Okay.
But really, what you do is you monitor all of the indications and parameters that are associated with the plant, and you execute the operations, be they, steady state, just changing power, or whether you have to start up the reactor or shut down the reactor. You respond to any emergencies that happen, and it takes a while. It took about 18 straight months of school every day from 6 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the or afternoon with mandatory study hours associated with that.
Wow.
But
So
yeah, it was
so were
go
you on
ahead,
a
really
ship
exciting.
or a submarine or what?
I was on an aircraft carrier, the USS Harry S. Truman.
Oh, cool. That is way cool. And so you did that, and then how did that bring you over to programming and blockchain?
Well, I always tried to do more than the minimum, and I was always trying to seek out extra, you know, things that I could do to, learn more, even on the ship. So that led me to get in operating the computer network that is associated with the reactor plant. We have our own private, secret computer network where we store all this information that has to do with the plant. And so I was in charge of administering that and onboarding new people with accounts. And that's where I kind of got into really liking networks. Although I've been a computer geek since I was young. My grandmother gave me my first computer when I was like 4 or 5.
Good for grandma.
With Jeopardy and stuff on it. So I quickly started getting into like building my own computers when I was about 10 or 11. I would just go to the garage sales around the neighborhood and kind of put Frankenstein machines together. But I didn't really get into more complicated things with computers until having to manage the network, and that led me into questions of like, well, how do I program computers? So after the Navy, I got this really great opportunity to go to Switzerland and learn how to program and do DevOps for Ethereum before the token sale happened. And so when I got the opportunity, I just said, I saw that I could go do more and learn a whole nother challenging skill and hopefully, change the world in a way while I was at it.
Right. So there was programming that you had to do on the USS Carrier, and then that got you interested in it. And then once you left the military, the Navy, you ended up taking advantage of this opportunity in Switzerland with the Ethereum Foundation.
Yes. And that's where I started to really learn about blockchains and the potential that they had. And, we spent every night dreaming after work about what we could do potentially in the future.
Right. Okay. So one of the things that we talked about, or at least I read when I was introducing you, was this idea of digital airspace. Can you explain to me what that is?
Yes. So you have, actual airspace, which is something that the, FAA kind of regulates, but you also have, well, actually, that's exactly it. So the idea that you can tokenize the airspace around you and use the blockchain to facilitate that led us to one of the projects that we're working on.
Okay, then that's with Mimir. So what motivated you to launch Mimir?
I have always wanted to run my own company, and one of my best friends from the Navy, Hunter Prendergast, we operated the reactors together, and we ran the computer network together. And so, we've been always just finding new ways to do things and trying to find ways to make things more efficient while we were in the Navy. And we've always been kind of dreaming about doing this. So when he finished his degree, it was just the perfect opportunity to strike and start our own company. So we did.
And how is it you picked this name? What is unique about Mimir?
Well, Mimir is a Norse mythological figure renowned for his knowledge and wisdom. So we, kind of figured being in this really new space where there isn't a lot of knowledge out there that we liked the name. We're kind of nerdy like that.
Okay. So that's the background of it, Norse god. I like that. And so, what are the products that you're working on?
We are working on two major products right now. One of them is this augmented reality solution that can use the blockchain to actually secure the information and use the space as a smart contract, so you can actually create, a market, and you can lease your space in the instance for people who want to provide media.
Right.
And in order to facilitate this, we needed a way to request information from the blockchain at high speeds and high frequency. So that led us to create we call it the Mimir Ethereum Bridge.
Okay.
And what this is it is a infrastructure layer that acts as a relay between the blockchain and mobile devices, so that you can use blockchain applications from your cell phone, from embedded devices, Internet of Things, and this will allow you to host blockchain information as a service or application provider. This will allow you to host this information using actual members of the network.
So the purpose of the bridge is to enable network members? I'm a little unclear on that.
It enables the network to grow and for you to serve these. All right, let me start.
Is it an infrastructure
with a little
thing? Is it an infrastructure thing, or is it an application? What is it?
It is an infrastructure thing. It is a layer of authorized hosts that can relay information from the blockchain to end users. So instead of having to host large amounts of infrastructure yourself, you can offload this to the already existing network of people who host nodes to interact with the blockchain today.
Okay. So the question that you said is it has the ability to scale. Well, there's certain limitations to the number of transactions that occur, and yet you indicated that there's going to be some high-speed transaction service aspect of this. So how is it that the Ethereum blockchain is going to be able to create scale and economic benefits for this new application protocol or application layer?
Using this service, you can take advantage of all of the nodes that already exist in the network. So it's scalable in the fact that you can request information from the blockchain in large numbers and not overload your own services or servers, because this can be distributed around the globe and requests can find their way where they need to go, where they're the fastest. And for any person who already hosts a node who has an available connection to relay information, they can get paid for performing this service on a per request basis.
So give me an example of this. I went to the website and actually watched the video, which was actually very fascinating, that explains it. But can you share with our listeners an example of how this is going to actually work?
Absolutely. So if you are a person who interacts with the Ethereum network today, you have to download the application. It's called a client. And what this client does is it looks for peers in the network. It downloads the entire history of the blockchain, and then it performs the required calculations to ensure the accuracy of the history that you now have, so that you have a full state of the blockchain that you can interact with, and you're sure that you don't have any false information. And this process, if you wanted to just go set this up today, it could take you a pretty decent amount of time, a couple of hours, to get this set up, or even longer.
Right.
And it's also more than just, the average web user does in a day. You usually just like to log on to a website and see what's going on. Maybe sign up for an account if you have to. But having to download all this extra software and set it up can be difficult and time-consuming. So instead of having every single person that needs to do this, what you can do is take advantage of somebody who already has done this.
Right.
And you can relay, or you can get information directly from them because they're already connected to the blockchain.
So that's this layer, this infrastructure layer that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yes, and to be able to do this, all you need is a device that has a constant power source, an internet connection, and is strong enough to actually sync the blockchain, which is a Raspberry Pi can do it, but you don't usually walk around with a Raspberry Pi in your pocket that's plugged into the wall. So it gives a use for all these extra devices that people have. If they want to participate in this network, they can, be a node and host this information to people who don't have nodes. So it's a way to help the network grow by using economics.
Well, when you say that these people who have access to a node, is this kind of like a mesh network that you're creating?
It's a peer-to-peer. It's sort of a mesh network, but it uses an underlying service that handles secure, small communications for like Internet of Things type devices.
Okay, so is it designed then for small transactions, or is it designed for this augmented reality kind of engagement?
It's just designed for small, lightweight messages. Every message in the blockchain is only 200, and it's a 256-bit hash. So it's the size of the message doesn't grow as the data grows.
Right.
And that's just what I mean by small messages.
Right.
Or small
Well,
transactions.
do you view then Mimir as a complement or a competitor to existing APIs that are existing?
I consider it as a complement. It is just like energy generation today. You have, large scale plants that are consistently generating energy, or let's say you have a solar plant, for instance, that only generates the amount of energy they need and more when the sun is at its peak. But
Right.
let's say that there is more of a demand on the electrical system than the main plant can handle. You have these peak plants that spin up to handle this excess load when it's necessary. So these other services could absolutely use our service when is needed. Say they have to spin up their own, if they normally spin up their own blockchain instance, and this takes them several hours to do so, and they need this demand right now, they can use our service and then just go back to using their own once they've caught up to their peak.
All right. So the economic benefits to the user or to these people who basically sit between the end user because they become, in essence, those peak plants, peak power generating plants for access to Ethereum. So how are they compensated? How is the economic benefits shared?
We pay the validators for performing this service based on how many requests that they serve, and we can keep track of that. The application providers are the ones that will pay us for this service based on the amount of requests that they serve, or that their service receives. And so this scales for them economically, because if they only have a few requests a day, then they don't have to pay per hour of using this service, they pay per request. And we provide some economic security by forcing these validators to participate in a proof of stake system so we can punish them for lying.
Ah, okay. So what's the difference then between Mimir and like Infora or MetaMask?
So MetaMask is essentially a way to store your private keys in the browser, and
Right.
this has to connect to it's called a JSON RPC, and this either resides on your computer while you're hosting an Ethereum client, or you have to connect to a remote one, such as Infura.
Okay.
Now, with Infura, they can serve a larger amount of requests, but they don't provide the same, security guarantees and the single point of truth of actually using the blockchain, in the sense that you're using active nodes that are continually verifying instead of just caching the history of the blockchain and serving that information.
Right.
So there's no way that you can ensure that you're not being man-in-the-middled. So that's why we use this secure end-to-end encrypted messaging protocol that encrypts you from the user to the validator, and hold the validators accountable economically for providing this information. So if they are proven to be a liar by another member of the network, their proof of stake can be revoked and redistributed to the affected parties.
I would like to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors, the Blockchain Academy. The Blockchain Academy is an educational training firm offering blockchain training for developers and stakeholders. The Blockchain Academy is currently offering the following live courses: Blockchain Security, Hyperledger Developer Workshop, and Ethereum 0 to D app. Visit the Blockchain Academy's website for course outlines and course dates. The Blockchain Academy's courses can be delivered as a company-specific training, tailor-made to fit your organizational needs, delivered both on-site and online. The Blockchain Academy's training is cost-effective, flexible, and can be conducted in a manner that best suits your organizational needs. To learn more about the Blockchain Academy, visit them at www.theblockchainacademy.com. Well, how is this different than just a regular app? Just for the listeners, because not everyone is very technical, so they're just interested in blockchain. And so having sometimes these definitional explanations is very helpful for them.
Surely. An application is just like any website or service that you go to now already. You download an app from the App Store, and this app connects to a server that relays the information back to your phone, and you can then use this app by offloading all this computation and data storage to the server. Well, in the whole decentralized internet model, instead of the server that resides with the company who has the application, the functions of the server are performed by the users of the network, because the code is distributed and executed on every node in the network,
Right.
for security guarantees. And so an application in this sense is just HTML5, JavaScript, CSS on the front. So it's just like interacting with a normal web page. It can be executed in the browser or on your mobile phone. The only difference is that it connects to the blockchain in the back end, and you don't usually notice that, but it does provide a lot of security guarantees and censorship resistance.
Okay. So why is it important for you to tap the blockchain for augmented reality apps?
For
The AR apps.
Absolutely. You have currently your system can be hacked through augmented reality applications, through malicious QR codes, and so you can't always necessarily trust that the data you receive is true and correct and not bad for your phone. And so one of the things that we're tackling as well, and recently in the wake, for example, recently we've had a few major hurricanes that
Right.
struck. And, people are trying to help each other out. People are trying to evacuate. And so you can use this system, and at Apple, just currently released their phone that has this augmented reality
Function, yeah.
function embedded in the device. So imagine that you're a victim of this storm and you're trying to evacuate. You can use augmented reality. The first responders can use augmented reality to display clear paths as far as safety concerns.
Oh, cool.
And this is interesting. And so for anybody people still have the use of their cell phone, and that's what really helps them out in these disasters, is because they can still access the internet via the cellular network. And so tapping the blockchain is good for this because there's only so much bandwidth on the regular internet via the cellular system.
Right.
And so large-scale augmented reality applications that are generally passing a bunch of data back and forth over the lines as these computations are being performed, it can stress the network out in these times. But using the blockchain, it simplifies things. Using cryptography, because it reduces the data, it compresses it and reduces it down to a certain size, and you don't have to rely on all the communication because you can rely on the trust of the blockchain, the single source of truth, to distribute this information securely.
Okay.
And swiftly.
All right. Recently, you wrote an article about digital identity on Medium. I thought it was quite an interesting article. Why is identity so important to protect?
It's who you are. If somebody has your identity, they can act as you. They can bankrupt you. They can perform malicious or fraudulent actions on your behalf without you knowing. So I think it's highly crucial to have this safe, secure identity, and also you have to use your identity to interact with most services today. If you want to have a bank account, you need your identity. If you want to have insurance, and if you want to interact with just about every major service that's required to function.
I don't disagree. The question that why I'm bringing this up is there is so many that are debating who is going to be the issuer of these digital identities. Is it going to be government stepping in and replicating what they already do with like driver's license and passports and social security cards to create this digital identity? And is there going to be some coalescence of development around these digital identity protocols? I don't disagree with you in terms of the value of having the digital identity and where it's important, but what are your thoughts about who's going to be the ones who issue it? Is it going to be, maybe on the bank level? You walk into a bank and they're going to vouch for you. Who's actually going to be doing this? Because the problem, from my perspective, with digital identity is that until we actually have governments who are willing to step in and actually issue this, that any digital identity that's just created by a corporate concern is going to be subject to, of course, always change.
Recently, there was the hack in Equifax.
Right.
So your identity these days, as far as the government and the corporations are concerned, is your social security number. And this is an outdated system that was never even designed for identity purposes. You can guess the social security number of the people that were born in the same hospital as you around the same time just by changing the last couple digits. So this is a very ineffective system, but between that and some security questions like your mother's maiden name and a lot of information that you can find given enough social engineering and public domain searching, given social media, if you put all these pictures and talk about all these people all the time, it's pretty easy to find out things and do this. But more importantly than that, in the wake of the hack, 140 some odd million
143
Americans
million, yeah,
Yeah, 143 million Americans had their identity stolen, and this is just over 40%. If you take the consensus, or I'm sorry, if you take the census, on the website, the government census, if you take that and divide that, then you get about 40%. And so 40% of Americans are walking around right now with compromised identities.
That's true.
And that scares me. So I really think the system needs to be changed. And I would hope that the government sees this risk because, I mean, that's an issue for not just the financial security of the people, but I think it's a matter of national security as well, given that such things can be tampered with. Cybersecurity is a huge deal. Now, all these identities, you just start doing some pretty malicious things. But it will take the cooperation of the government, and it will take the cooperation of people who are invested in seeing these services come to fruition. But Switzerland is definitely pioneering right now as far as implementing blockchain-based identity. So I would hope that we can take an example from them like we have for a while.
That would be actually great. I mean, because what is the city of Zug? That is actually...
Yes, the city of Zug, where actually this is where we were in Switzerland for the Ethereum token sale. And, it kind of became Crypto Valley in the wake of that.
Right. And you also see Estonia.
Because they saw the potential. I remember sitting and talking with these regulators, with everybody else, and, telling them about the potential that this had and what this could do for them, and they were on it. The Swiss are very progressive in that sense. They take what's useful and they apply it immediately, and they just don't use what's not useful.
Well, how does digital identity work with the Mimir framework?
Yeah, using the Mimir framework, everyone can be requesting this identity. If you have access, you can be requesting it from the blockchain by your mobile phone using our service. So it will allow for all these billions of people who have identities to be able to just request that information securely. So you can trust that it's your ID from anywhere that you go. You can actually, if all the governments, if they start the United Nations, which they are also working on projects like this as well, to help give IDs to refugees. And so if everyone is working together in this, a ubiquitous system, I think, can be created in the fact that just the hash that represents you can all be on the blockchain, but it can be each government's sovereign decision of how to implement their own particular identity system, as long as there's there's at least some correlating information. So I know that each state here has their own database for identity.
All right, they do.
And so they could still issue that identity based in the state, but they all just talk to each other by the blockchain. It's easy. Instead of having to call up the state next to you and talk to a regulator or an administrator and actually have them verify that you are you based on the database entry.
Correct. Well, can you share us a little bit about your technology team at Mimir?
Absolutely. So, my technology team, everybody is pretty engaged as far as how things are moving along, but the core developers are myself and Hunter, who is my friend from the Navy and my business partner, and he just finished his computer engineering degree, and he is just a fantastic coder. I mean, just the solutions this guy comes up with are instant and usually always correct.
That's
so
good.
We just, between the two of us and Forrest Marshall, he's a programmer by training of his own accord. When he was majoring in psychology in college, he started branching out into like laboratory procedures and developing devices to be able to do this, as well as just working for the school, having to run their web services as well for the laboratory. So he became very intuitive and very very oh man, what's the word?
I don't know.
Inventive. Here we go. He became very inventive very quickly. So, he thinks outside the box because he's not formally trained, but he understands computers from this very high level because he was doing, psychology experiments in the lab with artificial intelligence and
Right.
how, your mind, these neural networks are really what artificial intelligence models. So between the three of us, we come up with a lot of the way that the system works, and we sit and argue for hours over what's going to work the best and what's secure and the most efficient and the fastest. And then we sit about coding it. And we have one other developer right now, and her name is Lanchana. And she has a master's degree in computer science, but it's more from an informational technology standpoint.
Sure.
But she's still an excellent coder, having to do that as well. So she knows several languages, and she's really she takes the code and she comes back the next day with solutions in hand and some more on top of that. So we're just kind of moving as fast as we can, and it's very exciting to be doing this with these people, and more than just the technology team, with the other people on the team. Everyone is so passionate and so like-minded, and everyone gets along so well, and it's really just a very great environment to be in.
Excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about your upcoming token sale?
I can tell you very little about it.
Oh, come on, give us the dirt.
All right, I can't give so much dirt. We're still hashing out the exact details as far as everything is concerned. In the wake of all the SEC regulations, we have a pretty high-powered legal team, and our SEC attorney, we're constantly in talks with him about what is upcoming and trying to make sure that we are really, really adhering to the best standards and practices. So we're releasing our new website soon, and you can join our mailing list, and you can find out more at Mimir Blockchain.
Can you tell everyone what your website URL is?
Absolutely. It is www.mimirblockchain.solutions, or just mimirblockchain.solutions. That's MIMIR.
And for all of you listeners out there, of course, this link will be included in the show notes. So what are the funds going to be used for? What are your token sale funds going to be used for? And while you're thinking about that, and you referenced the issue of timing, have you now adjusted a timing for your token sale based on the changes that the SEC is kind of imposed on everyone?
Yes, we are planning for within the next few months.
Okay.
And what we will be using the funds for is finishing development, of course, of our final product, but we will be releasing a minimum viable product on the test network before the token sale.
Okay.
So that users can, test the service out, and people who are building fresh dApps and deploying them on the test network can begin trying to use our service. And we will be using these funds as well for future development into the augmented reality platforms, and we will also be able to guarantee that we can provide our service for as long as necessary to scale. So we will be able to survive for a couple years if necessary, while the network and everything grows to a point where we are profitable.
Okay. One of the things you brought up early on was you used the example of how this would be helpful to people in a natural disaster. We've had 2 hurricanes that have hit the U.S. We've had an earthquake that hit Mexico City. How is the blockchain going to be used to ensure funds are properly allocated in these natural disaster environments?
Using the great thing about the blockchain is the immutable ledger, which goes back throughout the history, and you can trace every transaction. Well, when you couple that with the aspect of identity, which it means that if you control a private key, then that guarantees that that is you.
Right.
So in this instance, you keep a very controlled system where assets have to be signed for every step of the way, and users have to, or the steps in this process, they have to accept the responsibility of these assets, and that is all auditable information. So you can actually trace exactly how much goes where and who had access to it each step of the way.
Right. Where do you see Mimir in 5 years?
I see us as the major provider for infrastructure as far as the blockchain is concerned, relaying information back and forth so that users can grow the network. I see us very heavily into research and development to keep the blockchain technology going and growing. I expect we'll be heavily embedded with nonprofit efforts the world over, and employing
Now, is that a
these
focus of
solutions.
Mimir, the nonprofit aspect of it?
It is a tertiary focus, and we are waiting to hear back on a proposal. And if that happens, then we'll get to be able to start doing this now. But it is absolutely a focus for the coming future, is to get heavily involved in these efforts.
Okay. Now, on your website, you also have the two white papers. You have the Mimir white paper, of course, which you've already discussed, but you also reference another one. It looks to be, it's called Lucid. So can you tell us about Lucid?
Yes, Lucid is the augmented reality application that we've referenced a couple times.
So your
This
Lucid
podcast.
is really the application that will use the Mimir uh, platform or framework to engage with the Ethereum network through the bridge.
Yes. Yes.
So tell us
And
what's unique about Lucid.
what's unique about this is the security guarantees that it provides, for one, with the blockchain information and some unique methods that we've come up with to guarantee the security in the code inside of QR codes. And so these little the barcodes can be placed on any flat surface and be used to render unique augmented reality information.
Right.
And these markers can be placed anywhere. But, what about your rights and your space? You want people to be incentivized to grow the network, so you want to put media on a space, you go talk to the owner of that space and have a smart contract that allows them to be directly compensated for they can lease out their airspace digitally using the blockchain.
Which gets us back to our digital airspace, which we started this with.
Yes.
That is great. Have you built any on the Lucid technology on that app? Have you built out anything like can it
Oh, absolutely.
like
This
how
is
to do
a pet
cooking or
project.
something like that?
We haven't built a full-scale application like that, but
Okay.
we prototyped it a while ago. So this is a project that we've been working with for a while, but we used a smart contract to define space and the information that the authorized URL that it was allowed to go back to, and we can host augmented information over a QR code anywhere that we place it. and also use that information to discover where you are geographically.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us here on Blockchain 360. You've shared quite a bit with us about your Mimir framework, and I wish you the best in terms of how your token sale is going to happen, and I look forward to actually seeing a lot more about your Lucid application. And again, thank you for joining us here on Blockchain 360.
Thank you again as well. And if you would like to stay up, you can find my blogs on Medium, and you can find me on Twitter at BlockchainNick.
The Blockchain 360 podcast is produced weekly. Have a question? Want us to interview someone specific? Wish to hear about a particular topic? Let us know. You can email podcast@blockchain360.co or tweet us on Twitter @blockchain360 or at our website blockchain360.co.